Libra rising, Saturn will be in retrograde, sitting in your 7th house of Aries till around December of this year. What will that mean for you specifically? I'm Sook Boy, you're awesome. Let's talk about it. Fun fact about Saturn, look, it's retrograding once a year for about 4 or 5 months. In other words, it takes about 30 years for Saturn to orbit the zodiac, and it's in retrograde about 38% of the time. Saturn, archetypally known as Father Time, in your 7th house of partnerships, agreements, negotiations, contracts, romantic, business, platonic, or otherwise. That 7th house is basically your relating function, those important relationships in your life. So basically, who are you investing your time, effort, energy into? Those important relationships. This is what this Saturn in your 7th house is all about. And whilst it's in retrograde, it's asking you to really be accountable for what you're contributing to that relationship. You know, what's a you problem? What's a their problem? Have you defined selfhood? Have you defined roles? Saturn wants some kind of system or structure in this commitment or in this kind of contract or union or bond, let's say. Now, Saturn, in all honesty, doesn't mind being in the 7th house. It lacks a good commitment. It lacks some accountability between parties, let's say. But unfortunately, it's not in its dignity while it's in Aries. Aries doesn't support Saturn's structure well because Aries can be a little more movement orientated. It wants to get things done now, whereas Saturn is about restricting, taking things away and applying patience. In other words, Saturn is a little bit immature in Aries. So you might be on the receiving end, or you might be in important relationships with some pretty feisty people at the moment, some impatient people, people that are a little bit immature, maybe very restless or reckless, and you're trying to give them some structure. Saturn is about applying pressure, putting in a foundation so it doesn't just blow away. This could be observable. Some of your important relationships, they've had a lot of pressure applied to them, perhaps. Is there pressure in the partnership or the family unit or at home in some way? How is that permeating? How is that pressure being distributed? When it comes to any relationships in this time, I would actually think about diversity more than anything. How can I diversify how I relate to these people? Can I do different activities? Can I have, meetings with them in slightly different environments? Basically, if there's one core theme or conflict within this relationship, don't let the relationship identify itself solely with that conflict or that core theme. Diversify. Spend time in different places. Try to talk about different things when you have the opportunity. In other words, build rapport in other areas of the existing relationship. Don't just focus on the wound or the pressure. Now, because Saturn is in Aries and it hasn't got a lot of strength, let's say, it has a hard time supporting the houses or the signs that are rules. And in your case, that's the 4th house of Capricorn and the 5th house of Aquarius. Now, this 4th house of Capricorn has everything to do with your property, your private world, the tribe you belong to, your inner family, your relationship with your parents. And so it could be a personal relationship that you're reflecting on at the moment. Is it worth investing so much of my time into this relationship or into this particular agreement? And it could have something to do with your home or your family. Alternatively, it could have something to do with your 5th house, which is your own children, your entrepreneurial projects that you might be interested in or engaging with or contributing to in some way, shape or form. This 5th house is about your interests and your passion projects and what you're willing to build in that area. With Saturn in Aries, there can be a lot less patience with the people you're collaborating with. Potentially, you don't see them as competent, or potentially you doing everything yourself and you don't want to ask for help. Or when you do show your work, it's criticized. People give you feedback and it's not always constructive, let's say. I guess one way of looking at the Capricorn 4th house compared to the Aquarius 5th house is the Capricorn 4th house is the obligations and commitments you make to your family, home, and your private world. Whereas this 5th house is the promises that you've made to yourself around passions and interests. Saturn retrograde is asking you to clarify, the selfhood, the independence within the relationship. So you can delegate your resources in areas you feel is genuinely adding value. Now, over the course of the retrograde, Jupiter also goes retrograde in your 11th house in Leo. So basically, Saturn and Jupiter will be forming trines off and on for a good portion of this retrograde, which is pretty favorable. And you can kind of think about that, like there could be some one-to-one relationships, obligations you have with certain people in your life. And Jupiter and Saturn are basically freedom versus responsibility. So sacrificing some of the freedom that you have within one particular relationship and absorbing more community responsibility, or sacrificing some of your community responsibilities, you know, your social life, so to speak, to potentially commit more to one particularly important relationship. These trines will give support to Jupiter as well, Jupiter ruling your third house of Sag and your sixth house of Pisces. So communications with your colleagues, communications around your health, your routine, you know, the commitments you can make to yourself. You know, there's a lot of exploration in the ideas you want to talk about, the people you want to collaborate with, and not to mention how you integrate, you know, new skill sets into your day, how you normalize new tasks and new skills that actually, you know, give some momentum to the larger project you're trying to achieve, let's say. Invest your time into the right people that stimulate your imagination. Imagination is the furnace of creation. It fuels creation, and the right collaborations you have in this time will help you set and kick your goals just that little bit quicker. Now, as a thank you for watching this entire video, or if you'd like me to walk you through your natal or birth chart at some point, please feel free to send me a DM. I'll send you a coupon code for 30 Australian dollars off my natal and transit readings exclusively for new clients. Hope that helps. Okay, bye.